Hello, Aaron.
Hey, Aaron, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. We'll get started in just a minute or so.
I like your shirt.
Oh, thank you. How did the dog trial go?
Pardon?
How did the dog, is it a tryout?
Yeah, it was really nice. The weather was cute, gorgeous. This is a scent trial where the dog has to find scents.
Oh, okay.
And it's pretty tough. And there was a lot of passes. I was working it, so
Oh, okay.
I didn't actually
All right.
run my dog. She's got her first 2 titles, and I'm
All right.
hopefully going to get her 3rd one in the fall. But it was very nice. My friends all passed, so
Good.
that was great.
Good, good, good.
That made my day.
Hey, Hans.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
So, never gonna doubt you again, Rabbi.
About that, well, about what?
Oh, and then the past other thing you said we're gonna lose Roe v. Wade, and I was like, I hope it's not right.
Yeah, I hope that wasn't right either, but.
That's just,
Quicker than I was expecting.
yeah, way quicker.
They're gonna keep it a secret until July, I think.
Well, that's what they do. I mean, it's gonna go through 4 or 5 drafts.
Yeah.
They never do this. They never, very different this time.
I just wish there was some way we could stand up and say, enough, you're not doing this.
Well, I'd like to say that we had, a variety of elections that
It's
was
true.
about saying, hey, if you don't vote for this right person, you're gonna lose the Supreme Court.
Yep.
And people said, that's not such an important thing. We don't.
Emails.
Well, and I know people that because they're Catholic voted for Trump and because he
Yeah.
was against abortion.
Right. Very simple.
And Biden is a Catholic.
It's what we don't realize until now is that abortion rights is a religious issue. And there's a separation in this country of church and state. We're not keeping that separation.
No, not at all.
So. Hey, Amy, welcome. This is
Hi.
your first time in house. Good to have you join us. Let me do.
I'm actually ambivalent. I kind of have come to like the Zoom arrangements a
Yeah.
lot.
Oh, I like this better. Thank you. I got it up in my cart now.
Good.
And did you say I can get a copy of the Siddur?
The Siddur?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, after we're done.
Yeah, and I did send a check. I hope I sent it.
Yes,
Okay.
okay.
Ron, what's the temple Wi-Fi password?
Oh, it's 18 5 times. 18, 18, 18, 18, 18. All right, let's get started. So I was expecting a smallish crowd because it's a very big day, and that's fine. It's a small group. But for our Zoomers, we have 5 of us here in person and a couple on Zoom, and that's just fine. I'm imagining a couple of folks will join in one direction or the other. This, in many ways, could be the most important session of the entire year. The Jewish high holidays is so central to Jewish identity. And each of these sessions could be their own book, like this one. We'll talk about this in a little bit. Each of these sessions could be their own CD of music. Each of these sessions could be a session that isn't for an hour or hour and a half, but for a semester. And so yeah, if I had to if we were doing this in August, this would be a 5-hour class. We'll be doing some August preparation for high holidays.
Good.
So this is just to get a whetting of the appetite, to get an entry into the high holidays, because the depth of this is so beautiful and so layered and so historic and so emotional that we'll have a lovely time entering into the conversation, and to know that come August, we'll have opportunities to continue the learning together. Okay. The song we're going to offer up, Ezra's going to share the lyrics to a Google Doc. This is a song by Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach called Return Again. It's a song that we sing here and is very popular at the high holidays. And the theme, of course, is second chances. So I will sing the melody once, and then you can try and sing it with me the next time, and we'll see if we can do this together. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Try that with me. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return to what you are, return to where you are, return to who you are, born and reborn again. Return to what you are, return to where you are, return to who you are, born and reborn again. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return again, return again. Turn to the land of your soul. Okay, so that gets us immediately into Rosh Hashanah ahead, right?
Yes.
It's the beginning of May, and all of a sudden we go, wait, we're not supposed to be doing Rosh Hashanah yet. So one of the reasons this is a hard class to teach in May is that we're just not ready for Rosh Hashanah. But it's such an important topic that I think it's going to be, once we jog our memories, we'll kind of fall into this. So Ezra, if you can stop our share, that will be fine for now. And we're going to do a quick check-in. You can check in about Mother's Day. You can check in about something new or good for you. And if you have questions about the readings, about the holidays, now is a good time to offer that up as well. So Alex, why don't you get us started here in this person?
Doing good. I actually broke my cell phone, but I was able to get a free upgrade, so it turned out for the best.
Great. Julie.
This beautiful day, I got to work a nosework trial and my friends passed. So it was really a great day to enjoy their happiness.
That's great.
The weather is beautiful. I'm so excited. It's supposed to be great this week coming up, so I'm excited about it.
Okay.
It's a beautiful day to venture outside, to come create moving.
It's good to have you in person. It's this has been a strange thing. Of all the things that has been like the weird one to figure out is our in-person attendance has been completely hit and miss. Our overall attendance has been terrific, phenomenal. But the in-person attendance, sometimes we get 2, sometimes we get 5, occasionally we got 7, and it just is what it is. And we're grateful for the folks who show up. But yeah, it's still a very strange thing to figure out people's comfort zones. Okay, David, we are checking in. Something new or good for you?
I got 2 pair of new glasses.
Nice. Nice. Okay, Erin, why don't you give us a new or good?
All right. I was working on our outside pond today and we got it all ready for the summer. So we put in a new filter, did a big water change. So it's looking good.
That's great. Jeannie Rhodes, I don't know if you can hear us, but if you can, if you want to share something new or good, it'd be great to do that now.
Yes, I planted a rose bush and I'm making some cloches and I'm taking care of my son who had his tonsils out on Tuesday. Ouch. That hurt.
How's he doing, Jeannie?
He's still in a lot of pain, but it's because it's healing really well. So everything's fine.
How old is he?
Yeah.
How old is he?
29.
Well, it's hard.
Oh, that's tough.
It's hard when you're older.
Yeah.
Easy when you're
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna launch us into a quick calendar overview of the high holidays. And what I want to think about, even before we go into that, is that we have just been through a holiday season. We just went through Passover and then Yom HaShoah and Yom HaAtzmaut, and in 3.5 weeks we'll be at Shavuot. So for the past month of time, and for the next month of time, we're in these 7 weeks, and this is the spring holiday season. The counterpoint to the spring holiday season is the fall holiday season. And it is even more complex and more layered and more actually longer. And so Ezra will share with us the grid that I built last year, and we'll kind of walk through the 60 days, the 2 months of the fall holidays. I left last year's dates up there, so I'm apologizing in advance that these are not going to be correct for this summer. I'm going to kind of guesstimate the dates.
Can you make it a little bigger?
Yeah, Ezra, we're asking if you guys could make your screen a little bit like 20% bigger or something. That'd be perfect.
I think it's the projector. It's just
Well, part of
super
it,
blurry.
yeah, but it's also
focus
small.
You know what?
There we go.
Perfect, good.
Hi,
Okay.
Amy.
I was trying to bring this up to join the Zoom meeting on my screen and mute everything, but I can't, the connection's not working. I guess everybody else got on.
Okay, so we start these fall holidays with a day of sadness, with Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av this year will be the very beginning of August, so it won't be July 17th. Just say the first week of August, somewhere in there is going to be Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is a day-long fast, 25 hours. And it is a commemoration of the destruction of the Second Temple 2,000 years ago. We still mourn for that loss. And what we often do as a reconstructing of that, as we're getting a bit of
I think that's
feedback.
because
Oh,
I
that's
went
you.
on mute. I muted.
We're good, Ezra, thanks. So the way we're kind of reconstructing Tisha B'Av in the last 20 years or so has been a day of mourning for the brokenness in the world. So climate change, grieving over racism, grieving over, I'm imagining this, reproductive rights, right? To have a container for deep, unabated grief. And to then just not judge it, but to be with it. And to say, okay, sometimes the brokenness of the world is so profound that we have to just simply honor it and acknowledge it. We have in the past also had the brokenness of the pandemic itself. So I don't quite know where we're going this August. I'm going to guess probably focusing on climate change will continue to be the primary theme. But the reason I bring this up as a starting point is at the end of the fast, we begin to, in our Torah readings on that day, think about hope for the future. Like at the end of every Jewish holiday, it ends on a day of hope, on a moment of hope. And the hope on the end of the fast day of Tisha B'Av is the hope for a messianic dream. That the world will get perfected and we are on that journey forward. And so from that moment forward, from the afternoon of Tisha B'Av until Rosh Hashanah is 7 weeks exactly. And those 7 Shabbats are called Shabbats of comfort. We are sad and we are trying to get back on track. And the days are called the 7 weeks of returning, the 7 weeks of getting back on track with our community, with our goals, with our holiness. And so it's a fascinating process for 7 weeks to focus in on how distant I feel from holiness in the middle of July or the end of August. How I really need Rosh Hashanah, how I need to get back on track, and how I can look back at the year and say, you know what, I've come up short. I could have been a better father. I could have been a better husband. I could have been a better rabbi. There's things I could have done. and to hold the shortcomings, not with sadness, but to say, hey, how can I do things one step better next year? So these 7 weeks are kind of like this consolation of the distance of how we are not at our ideal place, how we can begin to move towards our dream. That is focused in during the month of Elul. The month of Elul marks 1 month before Rosh Hashanah. So for 1 month before Rosh Hashanah, the traditional Jewish practice is every morning one should sound the shofar. So I'm going to share my screen now. Ezra, I'm going to stop your share screen for a second. I'm going to bring up mine. And I'm going to share my sound. And we're just going to hear a little bit of the shofar blast. This is from my Jewish learning.
Tekiah. Shavarim. Teruah. Tekiah Gedolah.
So just to give you a short sample of what that sounds like. Go ahead, Lynn.
It's sort of strange. There's a lot of places on the internet for learning how to play it. They all seem to be different.
Yeah, a little bit. But something happens around hearing that sound, especially for folks who grew up hearing that over and over again. It's kind of like a homing beacon. You hear that in August and go, oh, at our Shabbat service where we have our outdoor picnic, we usually do that in the middle of August. And we sound the shofar before we begin our service. It's like, oh yeah, it's that time. It's time to get back to business. We got things to do. And it's this orientation that sound is more than a horn blast. It's a cry. It's a cry from the deepest part of our soul. It's a cry to wake up. It's a cry to hear the cry of Sarah or Rachel or Hannah and to say, oh my gosh, the world's really a mess. We could do so much better. And you sit with that uncomfortableness. You sit with the sense of, yes, the world is broken and I have played a part in that brokenness. I haven't been my very best self. And so for that month of preparation, the rabbis consider the month of Elul to be the time to do your inner work, to pull out your journals, and we'll do some journaling here at TBS this summer as well, to reflect on all the ways you could notice where you've come up short and begin to strategize on how to be your best self. Last year, I was so profoundly distracted by the pandemic that I wrote a Rosh Hashanah sermon that we couldn't prepare to be our best selves. Because during the pandemic, we were in exile from our own self. That sermon's actually in a book that was published. I got published over the fall. It's very, very interesting to have that sermon published in a book, and it is now available. I can give you a link to that maybe next week or on June 3rd. But that it's called Exile from Ourselves. That was the challenge that we faced at Rosh Hashanah last year. I'm hoping that this Rosh Hashanah we have a little more access to our spiritual wellness, a little more access to our spiritual communities. And we know the pandemic isn't gone, right? We could be just as easily back in this hybrid mentality in September as well. I'm now going to move us for the next, Ezra, why don't you share the calendar one more moment. I want to take another 30 seconds and go through some of those other dates that are coming up. And then we'll go into breakout rooms and we'll talk about our own memories around Rosh Hashanah. But you can see that 30 days through a little. Rosh Hashanah last year was early September. This year it's towards the end. It's about 3 weeks later. And then 10 days after Rosh Hashanah is Yom Kippur. So this year Yom Kippur will be in the beginning of October. And then 4 days after Yom Kippur, so that Yom Kippur is number 3, the big number 4, 4 days later is Sukkot, which lasts 7 days. And then at the end of Sukkot, we have 2 big closing holidays. Shmini Atzeret was the 8th day of assembly, and Simchat Torah, the joy of the Torah. So Yom Kippur is our day of atonement. It's our day of day-long fast, our day of trying to figure out. Let me kind of take a half step back. If the month before Rosh Hashanah is your day of your month of inner reflection, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are called the 10 days of returning. During the 10 days of returning, the rabbis teach we should repair our relationships, our friendships, our beloveds, and we should turn to them and apologize for all the ways that our relationships are not as good as they could have been. And the idea is once you've done your inner work, and once you've done your relational work, then on Yom Kippur, you get to stand before your idea of God and do your work with God. And you spend 25 hours saying, you know what? I could have done better. I don't know what I was thinking, but I didn't do as good. And that becomes its own journey. So this journey that I'm outlining, these 60 days, I have a special book to share with you in a minute. But after Yom Kippur, we then build our Sukkot for our fall festival. And this is a day of a week of gratitude for the harvest, as well as finishing the hard work of going through these spiritual journeys together. And then we conclude with the last 2 days, Shmini Atzeret, Yom Kippur. And then at the bottom, you can see number 7 is Hanukkah. This year, Hanukkah will be right around Christmas time. But that's kind of the blueprint of the fall holidays. So Ezra, why don't you stop our share screen now?
Needs a little focus.
And yeah, we're not quite good on the projector. 2 quick thoughts before we go into our breakout rooms. One is the biggest moment that we come together as a community during the high holidays often happens during Yom Kippur, where we're doing our communal confessions. We're tapping our chests and saying, hey, we could have done better. And in that final hour, after a day-long fast, we do one last Amidah, one last set of prayers together. And we really do, like, from the bottom of our hearts saying, hey, we're going to try this one last time. We've done 4 of these prior. We're going to do 1 more and finish off this day of house cleaning, spiritual house cleaning, and hearing each other at the end of that holiday, hearing how we are all trying to get through the arduous fasting together and sing one last set of songs is so spiritually uplifting that when it's time to sound the shofar at Yom Kippur, many of us feel as if we're walking on air. We are so elevated by the process itself that while we physically come downstairs to have our breakfast, if we can do that again this year, we're hopeful. It is such a cleansing, spiritual cleansing, that we feel somehow purified, ready for a new year. And just to be so transparent about that moment, to know that all that work, those 7 weeks of preparation, those 10 days of relational work, that big last day of prayer, all of that has led to that moment. And the payoff is this communal sense of near ecstasy. We talk about drugs getting us high. We talk about using alcohol. Right? That's the spiritual path. that allows you through the path of being in community and being in your prayer life and being in this where we can access a deep sense of who we need or want to be or who we dream to be. And for that hour, we can taste it. It's real. We can see our future self and it's staring us in the face. And we go, oh my gosh, thank you for showing up. Let's do this together.
Well, as an aside, I sort of wonder, part of it's a hunger high.
Oh, of course.
But I find it interesting, and we're reminded in the reading that we're not, during this holiday, we're not busted for sins. We're busted for not meeting our own potential. And that's such a big difference.
Yeah. I think that's exactly right. I think that the discernment is to move from this cultural criticism of perfectionism to say, hey, why aren't we perfect? To say, no, we're actually pretty good. We're doing most of the right things most of the time. But sometimes we get in these patterns of behavior that trip ourselves up. And sometimes we don't even notice we're getting tripped up until we get tripped up again. So part of this, I think, is to discern the difference between self-criticism. You go, oh, that's the part that I'm stumbling over. When Gabriel and I are having breakfast together, we go through this dance. And the third step in this dance is him complaining to me about his day because he doesn't want to get right. And all of a sudden I can slow it down enough to say, okay, he's 10 years old. I'm not. I can learn from these things. I can be the adult in the room, and all of a sudden we get to play this game of adulting. Can we really look at it from that distant, mature perspective and engage with our lives with a deeper sense of fullness? Yeah.
You mentioned the blowing of the shofar, and in the reading, and I don't recall it, it mentions blowing the shofar a total of 100 times.
Yep.
What is that? Is that not just on the high holiday?
That's Rosh Hashanah. So on Rosh Hashanah, in traditional settings, they sound it 100 times. We
Okay.
sounded about 30.
Do we do it?
We do about 30.
Each toot, or because it's not 30 separate?
If you count every tikiyah as one and every shvarim as one and every truah as one, you would count 30 sets of blasts.
Okay, you don't count that 7 or 8.
No.
Okay.
Each call would be counting the hand. Okay, what I want to do now is I'm going to ask Ezra to put us into breakout rooms. Actually, Ezra, we've only got.
Yeah, I'm going to put us into one breakout room together.
You guys stay in the main room, actually, or if you want to go in the. And I'm going to put you guys on mute, and we're going to take, I don't know, we'll take 8 minutes. And what I want you guys to do in both spaces is have people talk about their Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur memories. What was impactful to them as they're thinking about Rosh Hashanah? What was meaningful to them as they're thinking about Yom Kippur? Because you're a smallish group, we'll actually carve this back. I'm not going to give you 8 minutes. We'll do this like in 5, and then we'll come back and we'll unpack together. Okay. So you guys are,
with parents that I think you could legitimately call atheists. He never belonged to the synagogue. In fact, never stepped foot in a synagogue until I was engaged to be married. And I remember when I was in school, the New York City schools eventually closed for the high holidays. But before that happened, my mother wouldn't let me go to school. And, she wouldn't let me go out. She wouldn't let me do anything. She herself, atheist that she was, wouldn't go shopping, wouldn't go to the bank, wouldn't go driving around in the car. And I remember asking her,
why?
If we don't believe any of this, and if we don't observe any of this, why can't I go to school?
I know the answer.
And she said, because that would be so disrespectful to the Jewish community. And she never let me go to school. And I have to say that that was sort of a really central, that exchange with her was really central to coming to see myself as Jewish, even though we didn't do any of the religious things. She was completely adamant about that. And later on, when she moved out here to Hudson, went towards the end of her life, and I was going to religious, to holiday services at that time. She insisted on coming with me. And I said to her, after 70 years, why are you doing this? And she said, it's so different being here in Hudson. In New York, I didn't have to do anything to feel Jewish. Here I have to stand up and be counted. It's like a completely different zeitgeist.
I thought the reaction by her mother might have been, I don't want to give it away to the Goyim.
Oh, maybe.
But I remember my brother-in-law's mother, a very incredibly secular family, no religion at all, even though he was Jewish, never circumcised, but he was Jewish, parents were Jewish, didn't practice a thing except every high holiday season, she'd go to everybody she knew to ask for forgiveness. Didn't do anything else religious besides that.
So let me kind of approach this from a secular perspective, because that's a great way to kind of regroup in this, in the sense that secular Jews, cultural Jews, Jews who don't belong to synagogues, what do they do? What are the Jewish behaviors that they do besides having a bagel and cream cheese on Sunday morning?
A Hanukkah bush.
Right, so they do three things. They'll have some kind of Rosh Hashanah gathering, a Rosh Hashanah dinner, or they'll go fast for Yom Kippur. They may even go to synagogue. We get at least 20 people here on the high holidays that we don't see the rest of the year. They come twice. They come on Rosh Hashanah, they come on Yom Kippur, and they're gone.
Lots more.
We get a third group who's here for those 2 days, and then Hanukkah and Purim, and that's it. And so from a very specific lens, even the cultural Jews need something. They need a thing and a connection, especially now when we're away from the thickness of New York City or the intergenerational experiences of my childhood. If we don't do it, it doesn't happen. Right? So all of a sudden, there's a certain discomfort with when thinness becomes invisible. Right? And all of a sudden, oh, I let all of it go. Now what? Right? I go through this tension with my own mom, who's a practicing Buddhist and has been an atheist for much of her life. But she is going through her own grief and loss and needs to figure out how to get back on track. And once a year she might show up at a synagogue for an hour.
Well, it's more than, you don't live in Hudson, you live in Beechwood.
Right.
In Beechwood. But in Hudson, you're genuinely invisible.
Yeah.
And that's really what I experienced moving here, was that if you didn't stand up and say, I'm Jewish, people wished you a Merry Christmas, and they assume that you do the Christian thing. They assume that it's okay for them to take your child to church with them.
Yeah.
They make all kinds of assumptions unless you're very outspoken about it.
I lived in Hudson during the football experience.
Yeah.
You've heard about that one?
No, but we don't have time for it. So you gotta
Just real quick.
Yeah, they don't have time for it.
Yom Kippur, kid didn't want to play, and they couldn't understand it.
It happens. It happens all the time. I still get questions every Yom Kippur. Students on campus can miss my finals. And we send letters to the professors. Yes, it's Yom Kippur is at a state school at a time where they can miss their exams. They can miss. They get excused absences. And
I remember I had to direct one of my students who did not get, he wasn't through he didn't know the Hillel. He was a freshman, and he came up to me. He was like, hey, I'm going to miss class this day because it's the high holidays. And I'm like, that's totally fine. I get it. I'm Jewish too. And he's like, I'm glad because a lot of my professors are not okay with it. And I said, well, you need to talk to these people right now. And I kind of directed him.
So the counterpoint from Amy's story of when the entire New York City schools would shut down for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is that Aaron and I are writing letters for our Jewish students to get permission because in Northeast Ohio, it's still invisible to whether it's happening on the calendar. Right? Phenomenal that shifting perspective of how we have to raise our own our claim for identity.
Well, even I have noticed the inequity in that situation. I mean, I don't understand why it's that way. I don't understand why the Jewish people have to fight to have the day off or whatever.
I wish it was easier. The funny counterpoint to this, getting religious exemptions, was this year I had a student come up to me and say, can I get a letter to miss my exam on Purim? I said, no. I'm not writing you a letter that you get to this. Purim is, there are no work restrictions on Purim. You completely have permission on Yom Kippur. You have no permission on Purim. Go to class. Okay. I want to now kind of walk through each of these holidays for about 5 minutes and just get a sense in a more in-depth way of what they're each about and kind of get a sense of the structure of these holidays and how we can wrap our minds around. So we're going to start with Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av, as I mentioned, is a day of mourning, 25 hours, and so it's a hard fast, and it's a fast that usually is not done in community like Yom Kippur, which becomes easier when other folks are fasting. When you're doing it alone and you're still going to work, it's not easy. Yom Kippur, Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of the month of Av, is accompanied by some unusual practices around prayer and prophetic readings. In my prophets class, we week before last, we read Isaiah. And next time in June, we're going to be reading Jeremiah. Jeremiah is the voice of Tisha B'Av. He is the guy who's saying, hey, woe to us, life is a mess. Look at what, that's the voice of Jeremiah. That's the voice of Tisha B'Av. The prophet looking at the world and saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe what we just did. And it is so refreshing to hear the prophet complain about the power dynamics to the elites and those in power, that it becomes, oh my gosh, we're also living in a very, very warped time where it's dystopia. And so the dystopia of Tisha B'Av, where the curses just kind of build on top of each other, are at once problematic and at the same time, it feels very much at home in a pandemic. It feels very much at home in a time of climate change. It feels like, oh, these guys nailed it. We just haven't been listening. And so we're going to be studying Jeremiah in the prophets class in early June, then we'll do Ezekiel. So we'll kind of have some study time on this guy coming up on our Saturday morning sessions. The other piece of this is really different as far as traditional Judaism. In the mornings, Jewish male adults put on a prayer shawl called a talit, and they wrap leather box on their arm and wrap it around. That's called tefillin. You bind an arm, you bind a second box to your forehead with a leather strap. And hang on, you keep it, but
Yeah.
These leather bindings are supposed to imagine us binding ourselves to God's commandments. And on Tisha B'Av, we don't wear them in the morning. We're so grief-stricken that we're not even permitted to wear them in the morning. It's only in the late afternoon for the afternoon service where there's a beginning towards hope. where we're then permitted to put them on towards the very end of the fast. And so I often try to go to that afternoon service and put on the tefillin, because I do like that hopeful piece to come out of the darkness and come out of the grief and say, all right, let's push towards hope. Yeah.
Well, that was my question. What's the purpose of the tefillin?
Yeah. The purpose of tefillin is to bind ourselves, to have a sense of obligating ourselves to the Jewish commandments, to the mitzvot. So Reformed Jews feel like they are no longer bound by the commandments. But those of us who still connect to Jewish tradition are navigating that sense of obligation. And there are 613 of them that I continuously circle back and say, so where am I with these? And so that idea back with the story from my great-grandfather, the past has a vote, it doesn't have a veto. He put tefillin on me when I was a kid. He wanted me to know about it. He didn't want me to practice it if I didn't want to, but he wanted me to know that that was a practice that he did as a kid and he did as an adult. And so whether I chose that practice or not, he wanted me to have a relationship to that idea, and whether or not I would do it. He wasn't going to say, hey, just because people don't do it doesn't mean you don't have to. You need to be aware of this.
Yeah.
So this might be a stupid question, but women don't wear the shawls and do the pillow?
In the last 50 years, with women's feminism kind of coming very much to the fore, they have begun to claim these practices for themselves. My wife has a Barbie doll. She's a conservative rabbi. She's a Barbie doll with the Barbie wearing tefillin and studying Talmud and wearing the prayer shawl. And so conservative women are beginning to, and Reform women may or may not. But I would say in Orthodox Judaism, you don't see women wearing tefillin or talit.
And why exactly do they think that's okay?
Okay, we're gonna
Okay.
take
Got
the
it.
entire conversation
Got
about talit and tefillin. We're gonna say this is a great conversation, and we're gonna continue this in August when we talk about
Okay.
Jewish prayer.
Just a quick
But we're not gonna dive too deep. Last point on
quick
tefillin.
question. What's Barbie's hair color
She's a blonde.
in this tefillin thing?
Yeah, she's a blonde. Okay. All right. So finishing up Tisha B'Av.
movie.
The ninth, the name of the holiday is the 9th of the month of Av. 6 days later is the 15th of the month of Av. Tu B'Av is a day where we begin this consolation practice. And Tu B'Av is also the middle of the month. So it's a full moon festival. It's a teeny tiny holiday. It's probably one of the origins for either Sadie Hawkins Day or Valentine's Day. So when Jews talk about Valentine's Days or Sadie Hawkins Days or women asking boys to go dance with them, that's Tu B'Av. It's a day of lovers. So Tu B'Av is kind of a teeny tiny summer festival day where we can think differently than about death and destruction. After Tu B'Av, we then get 15 days later, the month of Elul. Elul, as I mentioned, is the month of waking up and hearing the shofar blown. It's the month of doing Cheshbon HaNefesh, the accounting of the soul. And this is for many a journaling practice of looking at your deeds in the past year and trying to figure out your agency in those deeds. Where did you come up short? When were you caught off guard? How can you think through your own journaling? What's meaningful to you? So I often do a couple journaling workshops during the month of Elul. During the month of Elul, there's a psalm that is recited every day alongside the shofar blast. It's called Psalm 27. And the verse from that psalm is one thing I ask of God, this I seek, to be in God's house all the days of my life. And it becomes this dream during the month of Elul that I want to be back in God's house because I don't feel like I'm in God's house now. And so we spend that month trying to figure out the path back. I mentioned in my Isaiah class last week that the Hebrew prophets of the Bible came up with a new idea for Judaism. And that idea was second chances, teshuvah. And that idea of second chances, I think, is still the heartbeat of the high holidays, that we all get to acknowledge life is imperfect. And we get second chances and third chances and fourth chances. And then the rabbis have a kind of their own pedagogy around these second chances. And they say, the best form of this is when you're presented with a situation where you've made a mistake and you've come up short in the past, and you're in that same dynamic again, and you choose differently for whatever reason. And the Bible story that they refer to is the story of Joseph and his brothers, right? Joseph's thrown into the pit, and Joseph's older brother, not really Judah, sells him as a slave and sells him down to Egypt. And then 20 years later, Judah's put in that exact same situation. Will he sell his younger brother off as well? And Judah says, no, I'm not doing that again to my father. I'm not giving him another heart attack because the last one nearly killed him. And so that's the paradigm that the rabbis want to hold during the high holidays as the paradigm for success. When you're in that situation and you're going to get tripped up again, you pause. Instead of fight or flight, you pause and you notice, oh, I have a choice. Oh, I've made this mistake before. What am I going to do this time? And so this process is called teshuvah. Now, teshuvah is goes by the Christian name repentance. And for some people, they like that term. I don't like that term. I'd rather talk about returning. I think coming back to second chances makes much more sense. The word shuv means turn. Teshuvah means respond or return, reply. So I don't need to have all those negative valences about repentance in my language. Some folks do, but that's not where I go with that. The other thing that happens at the very end of Elul is we get a slichot service. So the Saturday night before Rosh Hashanah, we come usually here, we'll have some kind of evening program on that Saturday night, and then we'll have an hour-long service upstairs where we'll begin to sing these Avinu Malkeinu songs. We'll begin to sing the Viduis and the other melodies, and we'll begin to remind ourselves, oh, we're coming up on the season. We got to figure out how to do this. And so musically, we spend an hour in that mindset. That slichot service is what the Ashkenazi community does for that hour this Saturday night before Rosh Hashanah. In Sephardi communities, Sephardi being the Jews from Spain, North Africa, they do it all month. They have a month of slichot services, not a day, not a week, a month. And so every morning, they're doing their morning service and they're doing their morning shofar blowing and their morning Psalm 27 reading, but they do something that is really different that you should all think about for a minute. They pray during that 1 month only on their nose and forehead flat on the ground, like Muslims. And we go, oh, we used to do that. 1,000 years ago, we stopped doing that because we were embarrassed. We thought it looked too much like what the Muslims were doing, and so we stopped. But for 1 month, Sephardi Jews still do it. They do it at dawn. They do it at 5 in the morning where no one can see them, but they do it.
Don't the Orthodox do that on a holiday?
We do it one day of the year, and we, not in the Orthodox communities, they all do it. In our community, I'm the only one who does it. But I offer anyone who wants to get down on their nose and forehead all the way down, because something happens to your body when you lay supine, no, prone, when you lay prone on the floor.
Become a supplicant.
Become what?
Supplicant's the word he used. And so when you are flat out, right, the whole goal of that practice is humility. If the goal of these slichot prayers is to develop a real practice of humility, then I think it behooves us to figure out during that month of Elul how we can be more humble. There's a great teaching that during that month that one of the rabbis said he carried 2 slips of paper in his pockets. On one slip, it said, "The world was created only for me." That was in one pocket. In the other pocket, it says, "We are nothing but dust and ashes." And he held both. You know? And that's really cultivating that sense of humility.
It's a good thing humility is so different from humiliation, though.
Yeah.
When we were in China 6 years ago, I guess we
Amy,
went,
you need to speak up. I'm not sure that they're speaking up so well.
when we were in China, we went to Lhasa. And we, were visiting the temples there. And the Buddhists make a once in a lifetime pilgrimage to this temple in Lhasa. They walk and they prostrate themselves like that with every step of that walk. They lie down flat on the ground, stand up, take the next step, lie down. Do you suppose that's sort of the same?
I would imagine it's a similar spiritual practice. When I've talked with Muslims, when I've witnessed their prayer practices, we talk about the power of that it's a very, very humbling practice. And for them, I think it really informs their prayers. We still have bows, right? The Baruch is a bow. The Amidah, we do 2 bows in the beginning and 2 bows at the end. We have remnants of these bows. Even Aleinu is another bow, right? So we have these moments where these bows are still there, and we can imagine that they used to be much more prominent, and maybe they were not just a bend at the waist and the knee, but a complete supplication.
So is that saying something about the hierarchy between humanity and
I think so.
God?
I think so.
Is that the?
I know for Islam it is, right? That's that's what the term Islam means, is to supplicate.
We can at some point go over in a more definitive way, all the bowings, all the shokling, all the.
Yeah, that's in the prayer class. So we're not going to take a prayer detour today. We'll take.
No, I'm just asking something.
In the prayer class, we'll talk about the clothes, the garments, and the maneuvers, as well as standing on your tiptoes and doing that piece as well. Okay. Rosh Hashanah, that was Elul, that's the preparation. Now we're up to Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is got its own weirdness in the sense that in Israel, it's a 2-day holiday. In the United States, it's a 2-day holiday. Only in Reform Judaism is it a 1-day holiday. And so Reform Jews have let go of that second day of Rosh Hashanah. Most other folks do not. I still keeps 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. So on my second day of Rosh Hashanah, what does the rabbi do when he's not here? He goes to shul. I go to the conservative shul in my Beechwood community, and I get to pray on my own for the first time because I've been praying on everyone's behalf here, which is really lovely, but I don't get a chance to connect to my own prayers. So I get to do my own prayer practices on that second day.
Out of the class.
But Rosh Hashanah is a time of special liturgy, special focus in on the shofar as a symbol. a special focusing on prayer. The Amidah, that standing prayer, gets enlarged. So we've talked about that standing prayer in our prayer sections a couple times. All of the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur insertions, most get inserted during the Amidah section. So those 18 blessings get expanded. Instead of taking 5 or 7 minutes, it takes, I don't know, 15 or 20 minutes to get through all that liturgy on Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. And part of the process is looking at Rosh Hashanah as the birth of the new world. So one of the themes for Rosh Hashanah is creation itself. From the rabbi's mindset, Rosh Hashanah represents the birthday of the world. So when I'm working with 5-year-olds on Rosh Hashanah to teach them that lesson, I get a giant birthday cake from Heinen's, and it says Happy Birthday World 5782. And they know that when the kids' service is over, they're going to have a giant piece of birthday cake. And they learn the lesson, oh, birthday cake for the world. The parents don't get that lesson. The parents kind of get it and kind of, make it theoretical. The kids learn it.
So why
The
don't
kids are tasting the birthday cake every year.
Why don't you have a big birthday cake for the adult service?
We could. We could. But part of this is we're actually probably better at teaching kids than we are teaching adults.
Why 5782 then?
Well, that was the Jewish year this year, 5782. So it's not 2022, it's 5782 is the year.
I didn't see where the adults might be confused.
Yeah. Did I say hand? No, hand here.
Yeah. Someone I think told me that Rosh Hashanah means something like fresh wind or something like, is that true?
Not quite. It's beginning of the year or the head of the year.
Okay.
Or the time of change.
Okay.
Depending on how we translate it. So I'm not quite sure where the fresh wind piece comes
Okay.
in.
Yeah, because I couldn't find it in these books.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
But the Rosh means head or first. Shana means year or time or change.
Okay.
Rosh Hashanah is also a time for amazing foods. Just phenomenal Jewish foods that get to be part of our celebrations. The feasts are just terrific. And so there is a whole culinary aspect to Rosh Hashanah that is very much a big part of it. So if we had Toby Lieberman here, Toby would talk to us about all the delicacies that she probably makes for her Rosh Hashanah dinners. It goes back to the idea that it's something like a Thanksgiving feast. It's a time of gathering everyone together, at least traditionally, and having this amazing meal together. In some communities, in Beechwood, I would say different than Hudson, you drive down the street on Rosh Hashanah and you're the only car on the street.
Saturdays too.
Often. But that's phenomenal, right? To realize that on Rosh Hashanah in Beechwood, Ohio, which is only 12 miles from here, the world stops. There's everyone who's going anywhere is walking. No one's driving. The world has stopped. It's time to be in that celebratory place. Okay. Between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, as I mentioned earlier, is the 10 days of returning, the Aseret Yemei Tshuva. And there is kind of some of the Rosh Hashanah liturgy gets inserted for those 10 days of prayer. So you get reminded even on Shabbat or even during your weekday prayers of, oh, you're in this special time. And the metaphor that I want to hold for the next few minutes is at Rosh Hashanah, we imagine the gates are open. And God is sitting in the court waiting for us to be present. And after those 10 days, the gates close. And that's just a fascinating metaphor. It's both scary and inviting. And depending on which idea of God is, right? You know, you can think that that's a welcoming gesture, and you can think, oh, I'm not going near that, right? So depending on your God idea. But during those 10 days, the gates lay open. So our journaling work, our prayer work, all of those spiritual pieces are felt to be more spiritually significant during the 10 days. And so it tends to be a busy time, but I would try and do some kind of learning during those 10 days where we can do, like if we've been doing some journaling in the month lead up, to do one last journaling session saying, I want to hold on to that, right? Well, think about what you're doing. I want to hold a very specific metaphor for the next minute. At Rosh Hashanah, I imagine my best self. During the 10 days, I want to hold a second image alongside that dream of my best self, which is looking at the mirror and seeing my reflection and saying, so who am I really? And we hold that tension during the 10 days of your vision for who you want to be and that mindful perspective of who you are. And that becomes perhaps the inner journey of the 10 days is to notice those two sets of experiences and how they're resonating with you as you're preparing for Yom Kippur. Okay, Yom Kippur happens after 10 days. The Shabbat in between is called Shabbat Shuvah, the Shabbat of returning. The rabbis used to say there are two times a year that rabbis gave a sermon. One was on the Shabbat before Passover, where you go over the laws of Passover. The other is on the Shabbat before Yom Kippur, where you think about all the preparation for Yom Kippur. Len.
For me, the term 10 days of return is sort of awkward. Growing up, we always used the words 10 days of penitence. I'm wondering which is the better or more, better explains the holiday.
Both. As I mentioned, this is the term teshuvah, and teshuvah can be either translated as returning or repentance. And depending on which word resonates with you, that's the one that is probably the one you should use.
So, I'm sorry, you said return and
repentance.
And I always heard 10 days of penitence.
Repentance, penitence, same word.
Thing. Okay.
David and then Amy.
Okay, the question is, and I was under the impression that the Jews don't believe in heaven. So if the gates are open, where are they open to?
Nice.
Another year.
So the rabbis 2,000 years ago, I think, were still heavenly focused. And so I think the metaphor of God listening to our prayers or hearing our hopes, wishes, dreams is part of this. It kind of brings me to the title of this book. Alan Liu, who's a he was a Jewish meditation teacher, he died a few years ago, wrote this phenomenal book with perhaps the best title of any book I've ever seen. This is real and you are completely unprepared. It is the single best book written about the high holidays. Comes from a mindfulness lens. He was a meditation teacher. And he holds your question. Alan Liu says at some moment during a Elul, at some moment on Rosh Hashanah or during the 10 days or on Yom Kippur, every Jew will go, what if it's real? What if this whole thing is real and God is there and God is judging me right now? What do I do then? And your answer to that is, this is real and you are completely unprepared, right? So it's a phenomenal way to kind of take that great question and say, yeah, we can intellectualize this or we can take it to heart. And so part of this is, I think, the tension of saying, we're trying to do both. We're trying to figure out, like, what do we do with these metaphors in our prayer books for 2,000 years, and how are we living our lives today? And so it's a really, I think, a lovely question, and it's almost unanswerable. I do think, to be blunt about my own theology, is I don't believe God is up there waiting to hear our prayers. I don't think God, I think we pray because we need prayer. God doesn't need our prayers.
Yeah.
I do think, though, that the act of prayer makes us better people. And so if we need to pray, and if the act of praying makes us better people, why not?
Right.
Okay. And
So I had sort of a related question, which is, if not heaven, what is it? You know, we say, you know, who shall live and who shall die?
Yeah.
So is the idea that if you're successful in doing whatever it is that you're supposed to do during these days, that good things will happen to you in the following year?
perfect. That's a great question. Let's kind of unpack it with that metaphor in mind. During Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, we do a very special prayer called Unetana Token. This is where Leonard Cohen gets the song, Who by Fire. And so the answer to that question happens in that prayer, Unetana Token. At the end of it, it says, if you do three things, the decree is lessened. If you do teshuvah, tefillah, tzedakah, your decree is lessened. If you do returning, if you do prayer, and if you help others, the decree is lessened. And all of a sudden, that becomes a schematic for the entire process. This becomes the focus for all of the work. If I can return, if I can do some tefillah, which means for me, not just prayer, but self-discernment. If I can, out of the cultivation of those two practices, then give tzedakah or help others or do something righteous for someone besides myself, then my decree will be lessened. And so I do think, for me, thinking about the spiritual work of the season, that becomes the heartbeat of the work. That this becomes a way to know, where I'm saying that prayer, I'm going to know about my teshuvah work, my returning work. I'm going to know about my prayers and how I'm engaging with them. And I'm going to think about what kind of repair of the world needs to happen in my community at this time.
So would it be fair to say, in terms of what you said about your theology, that for you, the act of being observant and following the dictates of the religion are mostly about finding you as a human being, finding a way to be a good person, as opposed to the issue about relating to some external force?
I wish it was that simple. It's not. It could be. You could intellectualize it and say that process then engages me, but I do think that, if I'm being very transparent, I have had moments during Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur that were transcendent, that weren't about all of this rationalizing about what's happening, that my experiences in those moments were something beyond our realm of existence. And so it doesn't happen all the time, but there's an image that I want you to hold. For 6 years, I was working as a holiday rabbi in Salt Lake City. And I would go out there for like a week beforehand. I'd be there, for 2 weeks, I'd be out there. And it was a painting of a rabbi during the high holidays with his prayer shawl held out, like his arms are out like this. And the prayer shawl is as if they're wings. And the rabbi is flying. His feet aren't on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And so I talked to the guy who would leave that in my bedroom every time during these visits. And I said, so what are you seeing here? And he would say, well, I hope you are inspired to hold all of our prayers as you ascend to the higher realms. Take our prayers with you so that God listens not only to your prayers, but to all of our prayers. And so I keep that image in my mind during Rosh Hashanah. When I sing Avinu Malkeinu, I'm trying to lift your prayers. Just in case they're not getting high enough, I'm trying to elevate them to their highest realms in case I can get there, in case I can feel that sense of intimacy, that sense of loftiness. And that becomes a lot of work. That becomes not just the work of me praying my prayers. It becomes the work of hearing all of you do all of your prayers and say, you know what? I'm going up here anyway. I might as well just take you guys along with me for the ride. And I do.
It was just mentioned how Jews don't believe in heaven. I've heard that before. But if people are considered emeritus, where do they appear after the Mashiach? Isn't that supposed to be heaven?
The only way I have any good answer for the heaven or hell question is, it's a simple answer, but I think for me, it's at least satisfactory for the moment. The rabbis teach that when someone practices Shabbat fully, beginning at sundown Friday night, all the way through sundown Saturday, when one practices the Sabbath with full intentionality, the practitioner gets a taste of the world to come. Olam haba.
Is Olam haba heaven?
For the rabbis, yes. So therefore, we don't have to die to taste heaven. We get a chance every Shabbat. Up to us if we want to go there.
But there's no big change in the stage once the Mashiach appears?
There could be.
Oh.
Well,
we haven't been there, I know.
I don't need that piece if I can enjoy my Sabbath practice.
And that's a bonus if that happens.
That means I'm not waiting to get there until I die. I get to enjoy that reward now. And all of a sudden I'm going, oh, that's a very this worldly experience of the world to come. It's an open question.
Only other place you get that is probably with the Guru Maharaji.
Maybe. Okay. All right. Let me, I want to kind of conclude a couple thoughts. So I talked about Yom Kippur, about standing before, during the 24 hours of fast. We do 5 Amidas during Yom Kippur. We wear white. White is the color of purity. So I wear a white kippah and a white garment and a white prayer shawl. I wear white shoes and white shirts and white pants. And I'm trying during those 25 hours to really be as undistracted as possible. Be as focused in on the liturgy and on the prayers and the community as possible. Sometimes, most of the time, I try and go to mikvah before Yom Kippur. So there's a community mikvah in Cleveland Heights. I try and spiritually purify before Yom Kippur. I was actually more successful doing that before I got to Cleveland than I have, but it is a practice that traditional men do during that time. Traditional women do it every month, but Jewish men don't have to do that kind of purifying. On Yom Kippur, we are not supposed to make love with our partners. On Yom Kippur, we're not supposed to eat or drink. And on Yom Kippur, we're not supposed to perfume ourselves or oil ourselves or cleanse ourselves in that kind of elaborate anointing or perfuming piece. So you can take a shower, but probably not a bubble bath.
No problem.
And I talked about Nila. Nila is the end piece, the majesty of it. Let me talk about the break the fast for a minute.
You also wear vegetarian shoes, right?
I do. I don't wear a leather belt. I don't wear leather shoes. All that is, I stopped using leather for that day. It is really, when we're at Yom Kippur, we are imagining our own death. We're trying to say, if I had to die now, what would I need to do to have a good death? And that's a pretty heavy question to ask. If I was going to write my own obituary, what would it say?
Little big man, today is a good day to die.
Yeah, right. So that's a little bit of Yom Kippur in that sense that you are going through that humbling practice in a way where you're trying to figure out, okay, this is the best I can do, and this is where I'm at, and this is still hockey money. During the break the fast, we then get a chance to re-engage with our physical pleasures. We get a chance to reconnect. And there is a practice that from the moment the break the fast begins, you've got 4 days until Sukkot begins. Sukkot is where we build our little fall huts. And so the rabbis teach you should do one thing that night to prepare your sukkah. Put one nail in. And so we do something. We go downstairs to the basement, we pull up a box of Sukkot decorations or something. But we begin to think about that because we've got 4 days. And anyone who's built the sukkah knows it takes more than 4 days to get these up and around. We build a sukkah here. I built a sukkah in my backyard. We'll probably have a Sukkot party here. We'll probably have a Sukkot party in my backyard as well. You're welcome to both. And Sukkot is this great relaxation and enjoyment of the abundance of the spiritual world. It's kind of like saying, oh my gosh, that was a lot of work. 7 weeks we've been schlepping all this stuff around, and now we get to enjoy the fall. We get to enjoy the fall's harvest. We get to enjoy the abundance of life, which is a completely countercultural move. You live in a culture that says there's never enough. You always must be producing more for your next $1 million or how many. And Sukkot says no. For 1 week, you have enough. Enjoy your abundance. Enjoy your feast. And enjoy that there's enough in this world. And I love that countercultural move. I love that idea to say, hey, sometimes Judaism can really stick a thumb to American culture.
So how
I
long,
think Sukkot does that beautifully.
how long can you extend that through the year unless you want to be a hippie?
Oh, I think you're allowed to do it for 7 days in Israel, 8 days in the United States.
And after that, you go on a
You're done.
splurge?
Yeah, you got to come back to reality. You got to go to work. After Sukkot, we're going to zoom through Sukkot. Sukkot is, you have the lemon fruit, the etrog, you have the palm branches and the willow and the citron. You shake them. You basically perform a rain dance. Sukkot is a rain dance because in Israel, the rainy season is about to start. And the idea is you just got God's attention for one moment at Yom Kippur. Can you get God for one last moment while you get God's attention to get one last word in there? Give us enough rain at the right time. Because in the desert, there's a lot of droughts. And if you don't get enough rain at the right time, you're not going to survive. So Sukkot also becomes an environmental holiday. How are we living in the balance of life? What are we doing about our environment? How are we appreciating its beauty? The Sukkah is supposed to be open to the stars and the sunshine. We're supposed to be enjoying as much as possible the outdoors during that 7 days. Eating our meals. My wife and son will sleep out there in the Sukkah when it's dry. Studying outside in the Sukkah. You're supposed to spend as much time as possible. in that outdoor experience of, oh, when I'm outdoors, I'm different. When I'm relating to nature, I'm a different person. Spend a week in Sukkot in that relationship of relating back. Where I started last year, that we'll probably do again this year. Steve Kramer and I and Terry Kramer and a few others, Kim and Mike joined me for a bike ride. We did a Sukkot bike ride on the towpath, and it was great fun. We'll probably do another one this year because it felt like the perfect thing to do during Sukkot. Get on a bike and just enjoy the beauty of nature. So I'm hoping to do another one this year. Okay, at the end of Sukkot, we have Simchat Torah. Let me do 30 seconds on Simchat Torah. It is the joy of Torah. It's the end of the Torah reading cycle. You read the last chapter of the last book of Deuteronomy, and then you immediately begin reading the first chapter of the first book of Genesis in that same moment. And so every Jewish community concludes reading the 5 books of Moses at Simchat Torah, and then begins reading the 5 books of Moses that fall on Shabbat. And it's this lovely kind of curricular piece. It's like, okay, here's where you're at. You gotta, pay attention to where you are in the reading of the Torah.
And boy, the Orthodox, the way they dance.
It's a party. It's a party. Sukkot itself is a week of partying. Simchat Torah is the cherry on the cake, so to speak, and it's really a phenomenal. There's a lot of alcohol drank at Sukkot, a little bit like Purim. And what we do up here that's very fun is we take out the Torah and we sit people with their legs on the floor and we roll the scroll out on their laps. And so we get like 30 or 40 people holding open the scroll and looking at the scroll as it's unfolded. And that becomes a very, really beautiful way.
It's only 30 or 40 laps wide.
No, it's like we need 70. To hold up the whole scroll and unfurl, we need like 70 people, but we don't get that many, so we just do this shorter piece.
Is that common to other synagogues?
What's common is to try, if you've got like 70 or 100 people, to unroll the whole scroll. But since we don't have as big a group, we try and do a part of the scroll. Yeah. Okay. All right. The last fall festival is Hanukkah. Hanukkah is a second Sukkot from the historical perspective. I'm not going to dive into Hanukkah at all right now because we're too far away from it, but you don't need a lot on Hanukkah. Hanukkah is something you can Google and find out about. Let's talk a little bit of logistics about next week and then our big coming together party on June 3rd. Next week will be our final session. Ezra will not be here with us. So Ezra, we have to give you our final thank yous and goodbyes. Thank you, Ezra. It's been amazing to have you with us each week. So valuable to have your opening songs and so valuable to have you coordinating our breakout rooms and our breakout discussions. So from the bottom of our hearts, Ezra, thank you. It's been a great joy to have you as part of our group. Next week, we're going to talk about contemporary issues. We're going to look at contemporary anti-Semitism. We're going to look at other contemporary issues around LGBTQ stuff and women's rights and that kind of stuff. If you've got contemporary Jewish issues that you'd like to talk about, bring them next week, and we'll probably have a little bit of time. Hang on. Where I want to begin to think about with you now is that Friday night gathering on June 3rd. We're going to gather here in Hudson and probably have a catered dinner here in this space. If you want to bring one person, I think you can bring one person. So if you have a partner, you can bring a spouse or partner. If you want to bring a dear friend, you can do that. We're not going to bring up whole families. We have a grant to feed us. We're going to have a grant to feed the whole community. So we'll have a catered dinner here for about 30 or 40.
For which occasion?
June 3rd is going to be our final gathering as a group. The Judaism 101 class will have its last gathering in person. It will be our Shabbat celebration together. And that'll be from 6 to 7 that Friday night. Then we'll go upstairs at 7:30 will join the Temple Beth Shalom community for Pride Shabbat. We'll have a special Shabbat honoring LGBTQ folks. 2 of our Judaism 101 graduates from last year have been going through the conversion process, and they will be finished with their conversions on that date. And so we'll celebrate them both at the dinner and upstairs at the service. So it'll be a special joy to kind of give them a special honor as they're welcomed into the Jewish community. We'll put the Torah in their arms, we'll process them through the community. Be very, very precious. And I think this is the first LGBTQ Pride Shabbat this community's ever had. So I think to be taking some time on a Friday night and reading some poetry about being allies and welcoming in queer folk, I think is going to be very precious. I just found out this morning that Memorial Day Monday, Hudson has a parade, and I have been invited to this new LGBTQ Hudson group to be the clergy in that part of the parade. I'll try and figure out if I can attend, but I think we've got like the beginnings of this small group of folks who want support, want to be affirmed, and want to be welcomed. And it's what Reformed Jews do. We're really good at welcoming in not just women folk, but also queer folks. So
Great.
Looking forward to this. You are welcome to bring in anybody for the Pride Shabbat. Anyone wants to join us, we can have as large a group upstairs as possible.
2 quick things.
Yeah.
One, the Essential Judaism has this stuff about building the sukkah, and they give dimensions and stuff, and it's like 20 inches here, 11 inches here, 40 inches there, but not less, not more than 30 feet tall. And it sounds like a little dollhouse that's in the shape of the Washington Monument.
Yeah, it's a temporary structure. You have freedom to build it in any way you want.
Okay, because that's not what it suggests in the book.
Well, it tells you the minimums. It doesn't tell you the maximum.
Well, those are just minimums, the 20 inches and the 11 inches,
Yeah, yeah.
because it says approximately this. Okay.
You can't build it too high, right? I mean,
Incidentally, there have been a number of gay people members here, but there was never any formal acknowledgement or welcoming.
right. That's a crime. It's a shame. There should have been. There will be this year. We have. It's been an oversight, and we need to correct that. What I've been doing during my 4 years at Hillel, every year, for 3 of the 4 years, one was a pandemic, we've had LGBTQ Shabbat at Hillel. So now we're kind of bringing that here.
Incidentally, many of them, I think, just disappeared.
Yeah, probably. So, okay. So no homework. If you want to, read up on anti-Semitism and the current issues around anti-Semitism, the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, has some like new material. If you want to go to their website, you can do some reading. We're gonna
More this year than in a long time.
yeah, record setting. So no specific homework, and next week I think is going to be a low-key gathering. I think it's going to be a nice way to gather up. We're also going to do some feedback. So during the week, I'm going to give you a series of questions to answer about the class. What would you like to see if you could influence next year's class? Like, how can we improve this class? So I'm going to send out a little survey where you can send me email responses to what were your takeaways and what were things that we could do to make this a more enjoyable gathering for the next group. Okay, Amy, go ahead.
So 2 weeks ago, we were talking about some interfaith issues, and you said we should postpone some of that discussion to next week's session.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to kind of raise that as a request that we spend some time talking about that. And the particular thing that I personally am interested in is the reality of my life, which is that I'm in an interfaith relationship which is not skewed Jewish.
Mhm.
I mean, a lot of our interfaith families, I think, have made a decision to raise their children Jewish.
Right,
and
right,
stuff. But I think the reality for a lot of Jews is they're also in interfaith relationships like mine, which are not that way. And I'd just like to talk about what the reality of that is and how people think about navigating that.
Yeah, we can.
40 years later, I'm
Yeah,
still asking that.
I think that it's a beautiful question, and I think the complexity to the question is so rich
Yes.
that we should probably have it as its own discussion in this community, because we've got a number of interfaith folks here. And so I would, that's a great 5-minute question in this format, but that could be an hour-long discussion in a longer, more detailed format. Lori, Frankine, and I were talking about having some special Shabbat dinners throughout the year and having some themes like interfaith family discussions. And so I think we can certainly set that now as an agenda for next week, but as an idea for the coming year.
For example, I have this grandchild now who is going to be raised at least nominally Catholic. And on the side of the box of the Yehuda Matzah that we ate for Passover, there is there's a link for PJ Library, which sends Jewish books to Jewish children. And I had gone there one time thinking, oh, maybe I could sign her up for this. And they kind of disclaim this situation. They won't send these books to children, well, at least not without permission, to children who are not being raised Jewish, or at least without the permission of I'm not exactly sure, but so I guess the question is, so in a situation like this, how do we navigate transmitting the positive aspects of our Jewish culture, at least, to family and children in particular, grandchildren, that are not being raised Jewish?
And by extension, the other part of that question that we'll deal with next week is, we are witnessing the greatest turnover of wealth in human history. The current grandparents are going to be transmitting great wealth. And one of the things they could be doing in this transmission of their wealth is funding the future of American Judaism. So there's a lot in that, right? There's a lot to figure out. And so we can certainly dive in that as well. Okay. All right. Thank you for a very fun class about the high holidays. Have a wonderful week. Oh, something coming up. Yes, I'm sorry. 30 seconds and we're done. This Friday night, May 13th is Israel Shabbat. We're going to have a handful of Israeli guests here. We're going to have the Shin Shanim, who are teen helpers in Beechwood. They're going to come. And we're going to have Karen Almaz Marsha from Hillel. Karen is from the Ethiopian Beta Israel community. So you're going to meet a Black Israeli, and that's phenomenal. To imagine someone whose parents were in Ethiopia representing Israel with African skin, right? Phenomenal perspective. And Karen's got a lot of gorgeous stories to show. This Friday night, come, just come.
I think we had a Black Jew attend service this year once.
Well, now you have the second one.
Good.
All right. Have a great week, everyone. Take care.
I have one quick question.
Yeah.
So on